My phone pinged as I was signing Finn out of daycare. I glanced at the screen expecting a routine message from my husband about dinner plans. Moving to Portugal with Chloe. I've transferred our savings to my private account. Good luck paying rent. My hands froze mid-signature. Finn tugged at my sleeve, oblivious to how our lives had just imploded. "Mommy, did you bring my dinosaur snacks today?" I forced a smile, completed the sign-out sheet, and typed a response while my mind screamed in disbelief. "Thanks for the update." 3 words that mask the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Chloe was his administrative assistant. Our savings represented 8 years of careful planning and sacrifice. The rent on our Boston apartment was due in 3 days. My name is Rebecca Hayes, 37-years-old mother to 4-year-old Finn, and apparently soon-to-be ex-wife of Robert Hayes, who had just abandoned us with the casual cruelty of a text message. What I wanted was painfully simple stability for my son, the dignity of financial security, and the chance to build a life not constantly undermined by Robert's impulsive decisions. Standing in my way was the immediate crisis of survival. How to keep a roof over our heads when our savings account had been pillaged. "Where's Daddy?" Finn asked, as we walked to the car, his small hand trusting in mine. "Is he making spaghetti tonight?" "Daddy's on a trip," I answered. The first of what would likely be many carefully constructed half-truths. We'll have pizza instead. At home, I tucked Finn in front of his favorite cartoon while I called the bank. The polite representative confirmed my worst fears. Robert had indeed transferred the entire balance, $42,731, from our joint savings to an account under his name only. Since both our names were on the joint account, there was nothing they could do. It wasn't technically theft in the eyes of the banking system. I opened our checking account online, hoping Robert had overlooked our day-to-day funds. The balance read $347.12. Our rent was $2,200. As the reality of our situation sank in, my phone lit up with a call from Robert's mother, Marjorie. "Rebecca, what have you done?" she demanded without preamble. "Robert says you're refusing to let him see Finn." I struggled to process her words. "What Robert just told me, he's moving to Portugal. He's cleaned out our accounts." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. He showed me the text messages. "You're threatening to keep Finn from him unless he pays you more alimony. I've raised a better son than that, and he won't be bullied." As Marjorie continued her tirade, a sickening realization dawned. Robert wasn't just abandoning us. He was actively creating a fictional narrative where I was the villain. And based on the conviction in his mother's voice, she believed every word. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth, justice, and my son's future. Robert and I met 9 years ago at a publishing conference in San Francisco. I was an ambitious editor at Vantage Books while he was working in marketing for a rival publisher. He pursued me with the same charismatic intensity that initially made him successful in his career. Handwritten notes, thoughtful gifts, ambitious date plans. Within 6 months, we were married in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Erie. The first years were good ones. We moved to Boston for my promotion to senior editor, and Robert easily found a marketing position at a local firm. We bought a modest condo, traveled occasionally, and planned for our future. When Finn was born 4 years ago, we agreed I would take a step back from work to focus on motherhood. While Robert's career supported us, I transitioned to freelance editing, working from home around Finn's schedule. The shift in our financial dynamic coincided with subtle changes in Robert's behavior. Small expenses would appear on our credit card without explanation. He began working later, citing the need to make up for your reduced income. His mother, who had always viewed me as somehow beneath her son, became more involved in our lives, often undermining my parenting decisions when she visited. "Finn needs a firmer hand," she would say, while Robert remained silent. "Rebecca is too soft with him." 2 years ago, we sold our condo and moved to a rental apartment after Robert convinced me we could use the equity to invest in his friend's startup. The investment failed within 8 months, but Robert's explanations about market volatility seemed plausible enough. When I suggested returning to full-time work, he insisted it wasn't necessary and that Finn needed me at home. "Trust me," he would say. "I've got everything under control." I did trust him, though doubts occasionally surfaced. Like when I discovered receipts for dinners on nights he claimed to be working late, or when he became defensive about his phone keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. Each time his explanations seemed just reasonable enough to quiet my suspicions. 3 months ago, Robert announced he'd been offered a promotion that would require occasional international travel. The increased income would help rebuild our savings, he explained. Around the same time, he mentioned Chloe, a new administrative assistant who was amazingly efficient at organizing his schedule. Last week, I found a Lisbon travel guide hidden in his desk drawer. When I asked about it, he laughed it off. The team might open a European office someday, just doing some preliminary research. I accepted his explanation, ignoring the slight tremor in his voice, and the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. That travel guide should have been my wake-up call. Instead, it became just another warning sign I chose not to see clearly until it was too late. The day after Robert's devastating text, I dropped Finn at daycare and headed to Robert's office, determined to confront him in person. Surely he wouldn't simply vanish without properly dissolving our marriage, or making arrangements for Finn. The Robert the first married wasn't cruel. Impulsive sometimes, but not heartless. The receptionist's expression shifted from professional welcome to discomfort when I asked for Robert. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hayes, but Robert no longer works here. He resigned last week." Last week, my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "That's impossible. He was here Monday." She fidgeted with a pen. "I'm really not supposed to discuss personnel matters. But he submitted his resignation 2 weeks ago. Yesterday was his last day. 2 weeks. While I was planning meals and managing Finn's preschool applications, Robert had been orchestrating his escape. The receptionist avoided eye contact as I thanked her and walked numbly toward the elevator. In the parking garage, I called Robert's closest friend, Ben. "Hey, Rebecca," he answered cautiously. "How are you holding up?" "You knew," I said, realization dawning. "You knew he was planning to leave." Ben's hesitation confirmed it before he spoke. He made me promise not to say anything. Said he needed a clean break. A clean break from his child. My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm from 8 years of marriage. "Look, I'm sorry. I told him it was wrong, but Chloe makes him happy. He said you and Finn would be better off without him dragging you down. Chloe makes him happy." The words cut deeper than they should have. I knew their relationship wasn't just professional, but hearing it confirmed by a mutual friend transformed suspicion into humiliating certainty. "Did he tell you he emptied our bank accounts?" I asked. Ben's silence spoke volumes. "Christ, Rebecca. I had no idea he'd go that far." His voice dropped. "That's messed up." After ending the call, I sat in my car, the full scope of Robert's betrayal washing over me. This wasn't an impulsive decision or momentary weakness. It was a calculated escape, meticulously planned, while he played the role of committed husband and father. When I arrived home, a certified letter awaited me. Inside was a petition for divorce filed by Robert a week earlier, citing irreconcilable differences. The document listed his new address in Lisbon, and requested that all parental rights and obligations remain with the mother, with no visitation or custody granted to the father. He was legally abandoning Finn, while simultaneously portraying me as the one keeping them apart. Attached was a note from Robert's lawyer. "Mr. Hayes has indicated you have substantial savings to cover your needs during this transition. He will not be providing spousal or child support." I slumped onto the couch, documents scattered around me. Every aspect of our life together now appeared as a carefully constructed lie. The man I married, or thought I married, had been plotting his exit for weeks, possibly months, ensuring he escaped with our financial resources while creating a narrative that painted him as the victim. My phone pinged with a message from Robert. "Landed in Lisbon. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will handle everything." Anger began to replace shock. For Finn's sake, I needed to think clearly. First step, secure our housing situation before the rent came due. Second, document everything for the divorce proceedings. Third, find a lawyer who could help me navigate this nightmare. For the first time since receiving Robert's message, I allowed myself to cry, not from heartbreak, but from the overwhelming realization of what I was facing. When the tears subsided, one thought remained clear. Robert had underestimated me. He had always underestimated me. 3 days after Robert's departure, I sat across from Diane Carter, a divorce attorney recommended by a college friend. Her office was modest but orderly, much like Diane herself. "Let me be clear," she said after reviewing my documents. "What your husband did is reprehensible but not entirely illegal. Since you were married, he had legal access to those joint accounts, even if he was planning to abandon us." My voice cracked despite my efforts to remain composed. "The good news is, judges don't look kindly on this kind of behavior. We can petition for emergency child support and potentially freeze any remaining assets." She leaned forward. "What we need is proof that he's continuing to earn income while evading his parental responsibilities." I nodded already, gathering evidence, screenshots of Robert's text messages, bank statements, showing the massive withdrawal, the certified divorce petition. But finding proof of his current employment seemed impossible from nearly 4,000 miles away. That evening, desperate for short-term solutions, I called my parents in Ohio. They immediately offered to cover my rent and basic expenses until the legal situation improved. "We'll be there tomorrow," my mother said firmly. "You shouldn't be alone right now." Her support loosened something tight in my chest. With Finn safely tucked into bed, I turned my attention to Robert's abandoned desk. I needed any documentation that might help my case. Tax returns, employment contracts, anything that proved his income potential and obligations to Finn. In the bottom drawer beneath a stack of old warranties, I found a sealed envelope addressed to Robert's mother. Curiosity overrode my hesitation. Inside was a birthday card and a handwritten note. "Mom, thanks for helping with the Lisbon apartment deposit. Chloe and I can't wait to show you our new place when you visit in May. We couldn't have made this happen without your support. Love, Robert." The date on the card was from 3 months ago, around the time Robert had first mentioned his promotion. Marjorie hadn't just known about his plans. She had financially supported them. With shaking hands, I photographed the card and note, then continued searching. Tax returns, investment statements, our marriage certificate. I organized everything methodically. In his email drafts folder on our shared computer, I discovered an unsent message to Chloe with an attached resume listing his new position at Apex Worldwide Lisbon with a start date just 2 days after his text to me. Armed with this crucial evidence, I met with Diane again. She reviewed everything, her expression growing increasingly determined. "This is exactly what we needed. We can file for emergency orders today. Child support, freezing of marital assets, and potentially even an order for him to return to the jurisdiction." Hope flickered for the first time since Robert's text. "What happens next? First, we file the emergency motions. Then we depose Marjorie about her involvement. If Robert has started working in Portugal while abandoning his child, we'll make sure the court understands exactly what happened." The following day, buoyed by this progress, I received a message from Robert's lawyer. An offer of $5 0 inches full settlement of all claims. "They're testing your desperation," Diane advised when I forwarded it to her. "Don't engage." That night, I received a direct message from Robert. "Take the settlement, Rebecca. You won't get more, and fighting will just drain what little I've offered. Be reasonable for once." His condescension ignited a quiet fury. I didn't respond, but I saved the message as evidence of his attitude toward his responsibilities. 2 days later, we secured an emergency hearing date. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Chloe's ex-roommate Jenna, who had discovered my contact information in Chloe's abandoned belongings. "I thought you should know what they were planning," Jenna said, her voice hesitant. "Chloe's been talking about this for months, how they were going to start fresh in Portugal without any baggage. She even bragged about how Robert was setting aside money where you couldn't touch it." My momentary optimism crumbled as Jenna continued describing conversations she'd overheard between Chloe and Robert about creating offshore accounts and establishing residency in Portugal specifically to complicate legal proceedings. "They have a whole plan to make fighting them so expensive and difficult that you'll eventually give up." Jenna concluded, "I'm sorry. I just thought you deserved to know what you're up against." The morning of our emergency hearing, I woke to another text from Robert. "I hear you're dragging Mom into this. Bad move, Rebecca. Drop this now or I'll make sure you regret it." His threat strengthened my resolve. In the courthouse, Diane and I waited outside the assigned courtroom, reviewing our presentation one final time. The doors opened, and Robert's lawyer emerged, a polished man in an expensive suit who exuded confidence. "Mrs. Hayes," he nodded curtly. "Mr. Hoffman," representing Robert Hayes. Before I could respond, an unexpected figure appeared behind him. Marjorie, immaculately dressed and wearing the same disapproving expression she'd directed at me for years. "You should be ashamed," she hissed, ignoring Diane's warning hand on my arm, "trying to extort my son when you're the one who drove him away." "Mrs. Hayes," Diane interjected smoothly. "Since you're here, I should inform you that we'll be calling you as a witness regarding your financial support of your son's abandonment of his family." Marjorie's face paled slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The hearing proceeded with clinical efficiency. The judge listened to both arguments, reviewed our evidence of Robert's withdrawal of funds and new employment, and granted our emergency motions. Robert would be required to provide immediate child support and return a portion of the marital assets while the case proceeded. It felt like a significant victory, but Marjorie's unexpected appearance troubled me. Why had she flown to Boston for a routine emergency hearing? That question was answered the next day when I received a call from an unknown international number. "Is this Rebecca Hayes?" a woman's accented voice inquired. "Yes." "Who's calling? My name is Isabella Rossi, HR Director at Apex Worldwide Lisbon. I'm calling about your husband, Robert Hayes." My heart raced. "Yes, we received your email about his employment situation. I wanted to inform you that Mr. Hayes no longer works for Apex Worldwide. He was terminated yesterday." I frowned in confusion. "I didn't send any email." There was a pause. "Someone using your name sent documentation showing Mr. Hayes was involved in a custody dispute and had pending legal issues in the United States. Company policy requires disclosure of such matters during the hiring process." The realization hit me. Marjorie, she had impersonated me to sabotage Robert's employment, ensuring he couldn't comply with the court's support order. It was a calculated move to undermine the judge's ruling and validate Robert's claim that he couldn't afford to support Finn. "Miss Rossi, I did not send that email. Could you forward it to me?" Minutes later, I was staring at a message allegedly from me filled with distorted half-truths about Robert's situation and threatening the company with legal action if they continued employing him. The email included copies of our personal documents, some of which I'd only recently gathered from my attorney. My apartment had been untouched, which meant only one person could have accessed those documents, Marjorie, during her visit to support me after Robert left. I immediately called Diane, who validated my suspicions. "This is identity fraud and interference with a court order. We need to document everything and file additional motions." While we were developing this new strategy, my phone rang again. Robert calling directly for the first time since his departure. "You vindictive," he snarled without preamble. "You got me fired after everything I offered you." "It wasn't me, Robert. It was your mother." His momentary silence confirmed he recognized the possibility. "That's absurd. Why would she do that? To make you look unable to pay support, to undermine the court order, to turn you further against me." "You're lying," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Mom would never. Check your emails. Look at the documents that were sent. Those were in my apartment until your mother visited last week." The line went silent for several seconds. "I'll call you back," he finally said. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with an email from Robert containing a bombshell. A series of text messages between him and Marjorie revealing a disturbing truth. This wasn't just about Robert leaving. It was about eliminating me from the picture entirely. "Once you're established in Portugal," Marjorie had written 3 months earlier, "we can work on getting full custody of Finn. With Rebecca's history of depression after his birth, we can make a case that she's unstable. My postpartum depression, which I'd fought through with therapy, and Robert's apparent support had been weaponized against me all along." The revelation of Marjorie and Robert's long-term plot to gain custody of Finn transformed the battlefield. This wasn't merely about financial survival anymore. It was about protecting my son from people who viewed him as a possession to be claimed rather than a child to be nurtured. Diane immediately filed additional motions documenting Marjorie's identity fraud and the conspiracy to manipulate custody arrangements. We also reported the identity theft to the police, creating an official record of Marjorie's illegal actions. We've strengthened our position considerably, Diane assured me. But Robert still has the advantage of physical distance and most of your marital assets. I knew we needed something more. Undeniable evidence that would convince a judge to freeze all of Robert's assets and potentially compel his return to the United States. The text messages proved conspiracy, but not the location of our missing savings. In a moment of inspiration, I contacted Ben again. I need your help, I said without preamble. For Finn's sake. Ben's guilt over his silent complicity in Robert's plans made him receptive. What do you need information? Robert must have told you more about his financial arrangements, where he was moving the money, how he planned to support himself in Portugal. There was a long pause. He mentioned an account in Bermuda. Said his mom helped him set it up years ago for tax purposes. I didn't think much of it at the time. Did he mention the bank name? Any details at all? First Caribbean International, I think? Look, Rebecca, I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I never thought he'd leave Finn completely. This new information gave us a starting point, but we needed details. Account numbers, transfer records, anything that would concretely tie Robert to hidden assets. I remembered that Robert had always used variations of the same password for his accounts, generally involving Finn's birth date and our anniversary. With trembling fingers, I tried accessing his cloud storage using the most likely combination. To my shock, it worked. Inside were folders meticulously organizing his escape screenshots of transfer confirmations, correspondence with Marjorie, about the offshore account, even a document titled Custody Strategy, outlining their plan to paint me as an unstable mother once Finn was brought to Portugal. I immediately forwarded everything to Diane, who called back within the hour, her voice tense with controlled excitement. This is exactly what we needed. I'm filing for emergency orders, freezing the Bermuda account and requesting international enforcement. 2 days later, we received our first major victory. The judge granted our motion to freeze Robert's offshore account pending further investigation. Robert's lawyer immediately filed a counter-motion accusing me of illegal hacking, which momentarily threatened our progress. Then came the unexpected complication. Chloe called me directly. "Rebecca, we need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "Robert's falling apart here. That's not my concern anymore. Please," she insisted. "He's talking about flying back to Boston to fix things with you directly. I'm worried about what he might do." A chill ran through me. Robert had never been physically violent, but his current desperation made him unpredictable. "Why are you telling me this, Chloe? Because this isn't what I signed up for." He promised a fresh start, not a man obsessing over his ex-wife and hiding money from me too. Her words caught me off guard. "He's hiding money from you. He has another account I just found out about. After the judge froze the Bermuda account, he told me we'd be fine because he has backup funds his mother doesn't even know about." This was potentially crucial information, but I sensed Chloe wasn't sharing out of pure altruism. "What do you want, Chloe?" "Protection," she said simply. "When Robert finds out I've talked to you, he'll turn on me too. I need assurance that I won't face legal consequences for my role in this. I can't promise anything without consulting my attorney." "Then figure it out quickly," she replied, "because Robert booked a flight to Boston for tomorrow. And Rebecca, he seemed different when he told me. Scary different." After consulting with Diane, we crafted a proposal immunity for Chloe in exchange for complete documentation of all accounts and a sworn statement about Robert and Marjorie's conspiracy. Chloe agreed immediately, sending bank statements showing a second account in Isle of Man containing the bulk of our marital assets, over $200,000. With this final piece of evidence, we secured an emergency restraining order just hours before Robert's scheduled arrival in Boston. When his plane landed, airport security would be waiting. Robert's return to Boston unfolded exactly as we had planned. Airport security detained him upon landing, serving him with both the restraining order and court summons for an emergency hearing the following morning. His phone call to me from the airport security office vibrated with barely controlled rage. "What the hell is this, Rebecca? I came back to work things out." With a one-way ticket and no hotel reservation, I countered Chloe's intelligence having proved accurate. "The court hearing is at 9 tomorrow." I suggest you find a lawyer." In the courtroom, Robert appeared disheveled and defensive, clearly unprepared for the mountain of evidence. We presented the offshore accounts, the identity fraud, the custody conspiracy, and most damning Chloe's sworn statement detailing how he had planned the abandonment for months while systematically hiding marital assets. The judge's expression grew increasingly severe as Diane methodically built our case. When she presented the custody strategy document outlining their plans to use my postpartum depression against me, Robert visibly wilted. "Your Honor," Diane concluded, "we request immediate return of all marital assets, full custody of the minor child. To my client, supervised visitation only for the father, and a forensic accounting of all funds hidden by Mr. Prause, Hayes, and his mother." When Robert's hastily retained attorney attempted to paint me as the aggressor who had forced Robert to protect his assets, the judge cut him off. "Counsel, I've reviewed the evidence. Your client systematically defrauded his wife, abandoned his child, and conspired to manipulate this court. Save your creative interpretations." The judge's ruling was comprehensive. All identified accounts were frozen and placed under court supervision. Robert's passport was confiscated pending resolution of the financial issues. Temporary full custody was granted to me, and a referral was made to the district attorney's office to investigate potential criminal charges against both Robert and Marjorie for identity fraud and conspiracy. As Robert stared at me across the courtroom, I met his gaze steadily, no longer the desperate woman he had expected to find. In his eyes, I saw the dawning realization that his carefully constructed escape had become his prison. In the months following the court's ruling, the full consequences of Robert's actions unfolded with a certain poetic justice. The forensic accounting uncovered not just our marital assets, but additional funds Marjorie had hidden for tax purposes. Both faced civil penalties. Marjorie was also charged with identity fraud for impersonating me to Apex Worldwide. Robert's attempts to rebuild his life in Boston floundered. His industry reputation was tarnished by the public court records, detailing his abandonment and financial dishonesty. Chloe returned to Portugal alone, her immunity agreement having served its purpose for both of us. The divorce finalized with terms heavily favoring me and Finn full custody with Robert, granted only supervised visitation, which he rarely exercised. Complete restoration of our marital assets, plus legal fees and substantial child support indexed to Robert's future earnings, to prevent him from deliberately remaining underemployed. Most satisfying was watching Marjorie's carefully constructed social facade crumble when her country club friends discovered she had committed identity fraud to sabotage her own son's employment. The woman who had judged me for years now faced judgment from her peers. 6 months after Robert's text upended our lives, Finn and I moved into a small but comfortable condo purchased with the recovered funds. A home that was truly ours, with no shadows of betrayal lingering in its corners. "Is Daddy ever coming to visit?" Finn asked one evening as I tucked him into his new dinosaur-themed bedroom. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "But we're going to be okay either way." And we were. I returned to full-time editing with a publishing house that offered flexible hours for parents. Finn thrived in his new preschool. The acute pain of Robert's betrayal gradually transformed into something quieter, a hard-earned wisdom about resilience and self-reliance. Sometimes life's cruelest moments become unexpected catalysts for growth. Robert's parting text, "Good luck paying rent," had been intended as a devastating final blow. Instead, it became the first line of a story about finding strength I never knew I possessed.